Now that we are steadily approaching Honkai Star Rail's release, we are going to wonder what are the best steps to be able to make our account as successful as it can and be able to progress as much as we can with the least amount of effort and the least amount of resources spent. Now, of course, the information I'm about to give is going to be based on what characters are going to be the best when it comes to putting your resources into. Now, of course, a lot of the limited 5 stars or the 5 stars that you get from the standard banner are going to be a big pool of what resources you're going to be funneling into them, but for the most part, we are going to be talking about the free-to-play 4 stars that we end up getting at the start of the game. Now, this is going to be very useful for a lot of people because not only is not everyone going to be pouring money into this game at the very start, especially in the first release week or two, because not a lot of people are going to know if they're going to enjoy the game, if they're going to follow through with the game, but for the most part, we can try to make it a little bit easier with what characters are worth the investment for the long run to be able to help with your progression, to be able to make the fights a little bit easier. Now, of course, I'm going to be making a list of free-to-play characters that we are going to get based on the information that we know from the recent closed beta test. Now, so if some of these characters aren't going to be free, I will let you know which ones might not, but for the most part, a lot of them are going to be free and a lot of them will be given to you as a reward for completing a mission or something like that, while the other two that are at the near the end of the list are going to be ones that came from an event, but I will let you know when that happens. We are going to be ranking which characters are worth the investment from the top to bottom. I'll let you know where they are at the end of each character, but for the most part, let's go ahead and start talking about the free-to-play characters that we get when we create the account. Now, of course, for our first free-to-play character, we're going to be talking about the Trailblazer. Now, the Trailblazer is, of course, our main character that we pick at the start of the game, and the Trailblazer at the moment has 2 different states. One is physical and one is fire. Now, the physical one is a DPS while the fire is a tank. Now, thinking about the Trailblazer, I'm going to say this already, the Trailblazer is 100% going to be worth the investment at the start, because not only is the fire version going to be one of the better tanks in the game, helping out your team mitigate damage, but for the most part, later on in the future, later on in the story or the progression of missions, we're going to be getting future elements and they are probably going to be as cracked as the fire version or even better. So no matter what, the Trailblazer, of course, is going to be worth the investment if you don't already immediately have a limited 5-star or a pretty good 4-star DPS. So, you know, the Trailblazer is a pretty good investment to put on. They're pretty high in the list just because they're gonna forever be, you know, ever evolving when it comes to the game and its progression. Now, the next character we're going to be talking about that comes with the free characters that you get when the game starts is going to be March 7th, which is our ice damage dealer, also a shielder, also a, I guess you could say, freezer, because she is able to freeze enemies. She's able to give you shields, and those shields allow you to taunt the enemies as well, making it a lot easier for you to be able to actually mitigate the damage coming from the rest of your team or other characters that might not want to get hit. She is just an overall good unit for this. March 7th will get you past a lot of fights whenever you're struggling, because those shields are very strong, especially if you build her with the right stats. And whenever you're able to give the shield, you're invincible. Once she gets those skill points and she's able to put shields on every other character, you're basically never going to take damage. She's going to do infinite counter attack. She's able to freeze. She's able to help out so much. She's going to get you past those fights that you're struggling on very easily if you don't already have her on the team. March 7th is 100% the worth investment when it comes to early game and later on in the game when it comes to you know, keeping your team alive, keeping your team healthy when it comes to all the health that she is going to be saving from those shields. So March 7th is a really good choice to invest in, but I do think that she is going to be one of the second most invested characters when it comes to the start of the game, because not only do you get Trailblazer, March 7th, and our next character, which is Dan Heng. Dan Heng is going to be our wind with DPS character, and this is where I'm going to go back to March 7th. I do think March 7th is going to be the second best to invest to in the early game, and then Dan Heng is going to be the first. Dan Heng is going to be a really good damage dealer, especially for wind, and he also has a attack buff to himself. He also gives himself ultimate damage to himself as well, and not only that, he's also able to slow enemies as well. So he has a lot of stuff going for him. He is a limited wind DPS character because there are not a lot of characters in this game that have the access to the wind element or the wind damage. So yes, Dan Heng is a very safe bet. He's able to apply status effects, buff himself up. He is a really good DPS for early game if you don't end up getting anything from your wishes. So for the most part, for the first 3 characters that you're going to be leveling up when it comes to early game, of course, don't go super crazy into putting resources into them just in case you get something really cool later on in your wishes. But you want to do Dan Heng, then March 7th, then Trailblazer, because the physical Trailblazer isn't that good at the very start, and then later on when the fire one happens, they, you know, build on a whole different set of stats and stuff. So we'll talk about that later. Now the next few characters you're going to be getting, these are going to be guaranteed 100%. One coming from the login event that we're going to have, because we got all these pre-registrations, which is Serval. And then we have Herta and Asta. Now Herta and Asta are going to come later on in the story and you get them for free. Herta is pretty good, but she's only going to be useful for farming domains. Now, while that is very useful and it helps speed up the daily grind, when it comes to progression and doing these harder dungeons, doing these harder enemies, she's not going to be that useful. She does have a passive where you have 50% of the HP of an enemy drop lower than 50%, and she does a attack follow-up. It's going to help you do some more damage, get those enemies, if you build Herta pretty well, get those enemies and knock them out when they're already at 50%. This, like I said, is going to be amazing at farming, but for the most part, Herta isn't as amazing to invest to when you want to do more long-term thinking. When it comes to farming, yes. When it comes to harder events, harder bosses, harder enemies, when you're trying to progress at the very release of the game, I don't think Herta is going to be absolutely amazing to go into unless you're going to be wailing on resources and stuff like that, max energy, refresh. Then yeah, Herta would be worth it, but she is kind of at the bottom of the list right now when it comes to investment and how amazing your progression can get with going with the right characters. Now the next character we're going to talk about is Asta, because she's also a story unit that you're going to be getting in the future. Now Asta, over everybody in this list that I'm about to say, I think is worth at number 1. She has an amazing skill which allows her to actually do AoE damage, kinda. She does single target damage, but it spreads between enemies that are in the game or in the enemy. And it's absolutely amazing. This bust shields like crazy, and then her ultimate increases speed of all allies. Now the increasing of speed is very strong in this game. This is going to allow you to do more turns before enemies, being able to dish out more damage, do more DPS per turn or per round. Just an overall amazing ult. You can spam this like crazy if you build her right with the right energy. She is just an overall amazing unit. Good shield breaking, good speed increase, and speed increase is very busted in this game. So she 100% is at the very top of the list because she's just so strong. And then Serval is going to be our lightning damage dealer. She's going to come from the pre-registration stuff. So not only is she going to be a good lightning damage dealer, we also get her light cone as well. So she's going to be putting extra damage out. She's going to be very strong at the start, and something that a lot of people are going to be investing in very heavily, just because we're going to have her light cone, we're going to have Serval herself, and then later on in the future probably going to get some eidolons as well. But for right now, I do think she's going to be the best damage dealer in the early game as free to play wise, but in long term wise, I don't think she's going to be the best thing in the world. Now I do think she's going to be viable, but not probably going to match up with a lot of the 5 stars, a lot of the 4 stars that might come out in the future. So I do think Serval's time at the top, with being, everyone having her light cone, everyone having her at the start, is going to be a limited time thing. I do think she's going to be strong right now, but I do think she's going to wane out a little later on in the game. Now for our next 2 characters, they came from an event from the most recent closed beta test. Now if we don't end up getting them, that'd be a little weird because one of them is a kind of needed role and the other is a meh. But let's go ahead and start talking about them. Natasha is one of the event 4 stars that we got for free. Now she is a physical healer, which is very good. Her being a healer already bumps her to be very somewhere in the middle or the top, just because a healer, shielder, guarder, they're all very important in the turn-based game. You're trying to mitigate that damage that your team takes, and especially with some of her traces and some of her eidolons, she's able to give you healing over time, which is really good when you don't want to use a skill point on Natasha. Now Natasha is the only 4-star healer, with Bailu and Lukoa being the second healer that is a 5-star. We don't know when he's coming out. We only know Bailu is in the standard banner. But for right now, Natasha has a lot of value just because she is the only healer that's accessible to free-to-play players, and for the most part you are going to want to invest into her, because besides her and March 7th, these are going to be the strongest characters that are going to be carrying your team and keeping them alive if you build them very well. Now the last character, I have zero idea how you say her name, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but for the most part I used her throughout the whole beta test, and she is a very fun character for sure. But the thing is, she is a bad character in consistency. She is an RNG character. She does like this little card thing where she matches cards, and if you match all of them, then you end up getting a really good AoE attack. If you don't, you get a very weak single target attack. Now for the most part, this RNG wastes a skill point every single time you use it, and if you don't get it, you got to keep wasting skill points and over and over. Now she does a lot of damage, but this is very bad when it comes to early game, and she's probably just a fun gimmick character. I really loved using her, but for the most part she is very not worth the investment. She's funny to play, really cool to play, a really nice character, a very funny way of making a character, but for the most part you don't want to invest in her at all. But I said, if you like their personality, like their way they look, all that type of stuff, go ahead and summon, go ahead and use her. It's up to you. She is a fun character as far as I can say. But in terms of which characters should you be investing in the most to the least, I do think Asta is going to be at the very top of the list when it comes to resources pulled into a character at the very start, because Asta, not only does she have amazing fire damage to be able to break shields for a certain enemy, also she has that amazing ult that boosts speed for all allies, and that is a very strong ultimate to have, especially because when you build her right with the right energy, she's going to be able to spam that non-stop, and that's going to help you get so many more turns in and around, and it's just going to be absolutely amazing when it comes to DPS and also shield breaking. It's just going to be a well worth invested character. The only way I see them power creeping Asta is by directly making another fire damage dealer with a better ultimate of adding speed to a character, but I just don't see them doing the exact same thing anytime soon. So I do think Asta is just going to be an overall amazing pick for the future. The next characters I do think that are going to end up the best in resources are going to be Natasha and March 7th. Now, of course, I am saying this because these are going to be our very limited versions of healing and shielding, and Natasha has very great healing over time and initial heal. March 7th has great shielding and freezing and counterattacking, being able to whittle down those ice shields. She's just an overall great character, and these two characters are going to be cornerstones in a lot of teams just because we're not gonna have access to a lot of these 5 stars, a lot of these other 4-star characters that might come in the future in regards to healers. So yeah, you do want to prioritize these guard slash healing options in the game, because they're going to be the ones keeping your team alive in the harder processes of content. Now, the next characters that I do think are going to be well worth is going to be the Trailblazer. I know I haven't said a DPS, but you know, supports are going to be a really big thing in this game, just like in Genshin Impact, just like in Honkai Impact. They're going to be very important, as in all Hoyoverse games. Supports are going to just reign supreme on every single game. The Trailblazer is going to scale infinitely with this game, because the progression of the story is just going to give them more elements to use, give them more kits to use. So you know, you can never go wrong with adding resources to the Trailblazer. Now, the next thing you want to do is probably do Dan Heng for right now. Dan Heng and Serval are going to share the same spot, in all honesty, only because they will be power crept by other characters. Other characters will end up doing more and end up doing more damage as the game moves on. So as Serval and Dan Heng, they're going to be power crept eventually, especially by other 5 stars, of course, especially by other 4 stars that come in the future. They're probably going to add more effects, do more damage, do better shield breaking, do better everything. So Serval and Dan Heng are going to be near the bottom of the list, just because they're going to be power crept way sooner than a lot of these other characters. And then the girl that I can't pronounce her name, she's at the very bottom, sadly. She is a fun character, but she relies on RNG. She has no consistency. She does funny AoE damage when you finally get all the things to match, but if they don't, she does no damage. So yeah, you want to basically not put anything into her, although I might, because she's just a funny character. But other than that, that is going to be my list of characters of who you should invest on and who you shouldn't, and what characters you should start on first, because yeah, supports are going to reign supreme in this game, of course, as always, and DPSs are going to power crept a lot faster, a lot sooner than these supports. So other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a sub and a like for more Honkai Star Rail content, for more Honkai Impact content, and more Genshin Impact content as well. So other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. See you on the next one, and peace.